And but one important announcement: someone lost a pair of reading glasses.
Oh,
Yeah, and well, they were turned into me, so I'm not sure where we found those. Well, if during the message you find out you can't read your Bible, I probably have your glasses. So, but here's what we'll do: we'll put them back there on the table where the ladies are sitting, and that way, if someone discovers they lost them, we'll pick them up later. Okay, let's begin with a word of prayer, and then I'm going to turn it over to Steve. He'll introduce the program for tonight. Make sure that you get a bright green schedule is the one that's for tonight and tomorrow. And I know the students were really excited today. We had a great day looking at the creation point of view and the evidence for it and discussing it. Really profitable. I trust our time will be just as profitable tonight. Father, we come to you. We thank you most of all for your great love for us, for God so loved the world. And we know that that wasn't just the earth. It certainly wasn't the world system, but it was the people of the world. And even though we'd sinned and broken the rules of a holy, righteous God, you still loved us. And Father, for your grace to abound, to give us a Savior, brought in such a special way, for you to create an earth in such a special way, Father, it shows what a special God you are. So, Father, we pray that during this weekend together that we might appreciate you more, that we might love you more, follow your word more. Father, we pray for input, and then, Father, we pray that our hearts might be soft to take to heart all that's being said. We pray and ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Brother Steve.
thank you. I'm Steve McIlvain. I'm going to facilitate tonight. That means I'm going to make sure that we start on time, we end on time. I'm going to try to corral the speakers to make sure they start and end on time, which is very difficult for some of them, let me tell you. So anyway, and I'll make sure we get a break about, we'll go through the first 4 days of creation, and then we'll take a break, and there'll be some treats out there in the hall, in the foyer out there for you. So that'll be about a 12-minute break. So we'll take a little bit of a recess in there. On behalf of the Genesis Academy and the folks that are involved in that, I want to thank you for coming. I want to reiterate how wonderful the Sunrise Christian Academy has been to invite us in and to host us for this conference this evening. And we worked with all of the students here from kindergarten through seniors in high school today, throughout the day, on different topics of creation. They were awesome today. Their behavior was unbelievable, and we're so thankful that we got to work with them. So we're actually very interested in students in terms of and I'll explain to you why we call ourselves the Joshua Project tomorrow morning. But I want to thank Dr. Lindstead and his staff. Olivia, are you around, Olivia, or is she out working somewhere? Oh, back there on the back, wave, say hi. She's so helpful to helping get this organized. And then we have what's called a red hot spark plug. That's somebody I work with also that kind of knows Wichita, knows how to move around, and because I don't. I have a couple cousins that grew up here, but other than that, I don't know much about Wichita. So she has helped a lot with Olivia, and they've kind of organized this whole thing, and that's why you're going to get treats and those kinds of things that we have today. So anyway, I want to make sure that we stay on time, and I've got 4 or 5 slides here that I want to show you. They'll tell you a little bit about how we got here and what we believe, so you'll have an idea of what we've got going on. So let's look up at the screen, and we'll start with a little bit of our history. We're a bunch of old people that went to started Campus Crusade back in the mid to late 60s at Emporia State University. And we got one of our members was right here. Raise your hand, right here. Okay. He was in our group, and then Diana was in our group. Raise your hand. My wife, we got married out of that. And one of our teachers in the red sweater over here, Dave, was our mentor because he was older than we were. And he was going to seminary, and he had a little Bible background. And so he helped us grow because a lot of us were new Christians. So we formed in 2008 as a volunteer organization. Some of that group came back together. And we said, we're old, but we've got one more good effort in it. Lord, what do you want us to do? And we're going to want to do this before we die or before Jesus comes back. And this is what, after doing a little strategic planning over a year, bringing that group back together again, this is what we came up with. Our culture is beating up the first 11 chapters of Genesis. And they're taking that away from our kids and many adults, many churches, even evangelical churches. And so we said, we're going to attack that. God said, we want you to go after that. So that's how we're here and why we got started. We're dedicated to proclaiming biblical truth from a scientific point of view with an emphasis on Genesis 1 through 11 with programs such as the Joshua Project. Now you're saying, how does Joshua Project get involved with Genesis 1 through 11? And I'll tell you that tomorrow morning. I'll let you know that tomorrow morning. So we're going to move on here real quickly. We have 4 principles that we follow. We're old. We've been in situations all of our lives where we've seen ourselves and others make mistakes. So we said we're going to do some things that we know will kind of keep us on the straight and narrow. So we're all volunteer. We are all either retired or semi-retired, and we have no staff that we pay. We have no buildings. We just go where God opens a door, like here, and do what we do. We don't charge anything. You're here for free. There's nothing. The table back there is for the school, not for us. And so that's first thing. We give away materials. We give books away when we do our 6-week class, not one of these weekend things. If you take our course, that's always free. We use a lot of online media and resources. Genesis Academy together.net. If you want more information, you want to maybe get a chance to review some of the things you hear tonight, GenesisAcademy.net. It's a great website done primarily by Dan over there. You'll meet later on. And we don't ask anybody for any money. So we're not going to do a free will offering. You're here. That's what we want. That's our ministry to all of you. And we're really excited to be in Wichita. So it's great. What do we believe? Wow. All right. Good basketball here, right? Okay. Especially right here. Yeah. I saw some kids. Oh, man. I don't know. Today there were some kids here that are going to be at Wichita State or KU or somewhere. The Bible is the one true, accurate, historical record of God's creation, fall, flood, tower, and of course, Jesus the hope. So that's the way it is, and that's what we believe, and that's what we're going to be teaching as we go through the evening. So we're in Genesis chapters 1 through 11. I just shared what those are. Tonight, we're going to cover the creation, the 6 days of creation. So after the first 4 days, we're going to take a break, and then we'll come back and do 5 and 6, okay? So that's kind of where we're at. Those 6 days, we're going to start with day 1, which covers time, matter, and energy, and day 2, which talks about the atmosphere, and day 3, which is the magnetosphere. And you can, if you kind of follow along, well, I'm sorry, I don't know where the arrow is, but these pictures depict what I'm sharing. We've got then day 4, before we get to break, will be on the cosmos. So you see the cosmos over there on the left-hand side. And then when we come back from break, we'll cover the sea and air creatures. So we've got sea and air here, and then we'll do animals and humankind over here. So if we get started, I want to introduce, but I'm going to interview just briefly, Dan Aldrich, and Dan's going to take the first 2 days. So you ready to go? Yep. All right. Dan, come on over.
All right.
This is Dan Aldrich. Dan is going to tell you. Hey, you haven't even said anything.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Go sit down, Steve. We're good, right? Okay.
Tell everybody a little bit about your background, family, maybe mention a wife. You know?
I do. My wife of 32 years.
Yeah, let's hear it for that.
Right there in the brown. Vicki, thank you very much.
Vicki, raise your hand. She goes, look at there. There we go.
32 years of patience. That's what that is. And training for me. That's all good.
And
all good.
Okay.
I was born in Kansas City. I was raised in Arizona. Did some time in the military. Background in sciences and whatnot. I was an evolutionist. I was studied chemistry and things like this. Ended up in information sciences and worked for a Fortune 500 company for about 30 years doing a lot of neat technology stuff, from fiber optics to search engines and things like this as a leader in that area.
That's great. Yeah.
That was my background. We have a son. He's married, and he's 30, and he's up in Kansas City. His name's Sam.
Great. And just to reiterate, he wasn't a creationist growing up all of his life. So he's an evolutionist who became a young earth creationist. You
That's
got
right.
that? So he understands the evolution perspective. Okay, and he taught the kids this afternoon. He has a great presentation, and it's on our website on the main page. Click on it and watch his talk on evolution. It's just awesome. The kids loved it, I think. And so, you ready to go?
Sure,
Day
let's
one
go.
and two, take us through.
That's
Here
right.
we go.
I think we
I'm going
start
to
off-
keep him on task now.
I think we start off with a video from John Lennox. If you know who he is, great guy to listen to, our mathematics guy from Oxford, talking about the Big Bang and the beginning, knowing that the second law of science of thermodynamics is true, that things end, there's an entropy going on. We know there was a beginning, and he's going to go here. And before we read Genesis 1:1, we're going to look at this just to get a good context for. We know there was a beginning. Check this out. Maybe it's not.
The Big Bang
yes, it is.
does not disprove the need for God or creator. That's a confusion of thought. The Big Bang is simply telling us we believe there was a beginning. That is what Genesis has been saying for thousands of years. The point is, Genesis is not only telling us that there was a beginning, it is also telling us what science cannot tell us, the ultimate cause of that beginning, which is God. So a Christian has nothing to fear from people using the words Big Bang, although, as I said earlier, they are misleading. You think of an explosion that makes a noise, which is very far from the basic idea. But let's grasp the central thing, which I find is marvelous. Because, as I've often said to physicists, look, it took you till the 1960s to come to believe that the universe had a beginning. I actually believed it myself before you did, because I have reasons for thinking that the biblical revelation is true. And what is more, if you had taken seriously the worldview of the Bible and weren't so committed to Aristotle, you might have looked for evidence for a beginning to space-time much earlier than you did. Now, this is very important because many scientists say, well, the Bible makes no predictions. Well, that's not quite true, because if you take its worldview seriously, here at the very start, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, if that's true, you can test it. And this is exactly what happened through Lemaitre, Hubble, and Penzias and Wilson. They were testing something that the Bible had stated. And isn't it interesting? It was Georges Lemaitre, a priest, who first led them to the idea.
So, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. What do we have in this one verse? What do we have? We have time, we have the place, the space, and we have the matter, and we will here in a moment have energy as well as part of all of this, but we have it right here. And whoever this God is, he has to sit outside of that to have created that. So we're dealing with an agent, an intelligent agent that has the ability to operate outside of time, space, and matter. That's what's in the first verse. The other thing that's in the first verse of the Bible is this word for God, which is Elohim, which is plural masculine, which means we have a Trinitarian God mentioned in the very first verse of the Bible. A plural God. He is eternal, outside of time, space, and matter, omnipotent, omniscient, and has this plural capability. But let's go on. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So what do we have? not just Elohim plural, but we have a water ball, basically. When's the next time you're going to see the earth as just basically a water ball? Where? The flood, the great reset. There it was. Noah knew something, right? He was part of that. All right, there it is. What's interesting is we have this nature of God in its plural form, and we have water. Well, what is water? Well, water is one of these extremely rare elements in nature, right? That is both what? It is a solid, it can be a solid, it can be a vapor, and it can be liquid. It's Trinitarian, right? Also notice that there's darkness before God shows up and does the work here. Then God said, let there be light. So now we're dealing with our energy component as well. And there was light. Well, guess what? Light actually, if you've studied this stuff a little bit, it actually has a Trinitarian nature to it as well. Does anybody keep a reptile pet in here? There's one. Okay. There's several of them. Okay. Ariana keeps one. And when it's cold in the house, what do you got to do for him or her? You got to put a heat lamp in there, don't you? A red light usually, right? And that's infrared. So the heat energy from light is infrared. That's the first spectrum we're thinking of. The next is the visible spectrum. We're going to talk about this in a moment. And the last is the ultraviolet, really, and the radio waves and whatnot. So here we have light. God saw that there was light, and it was good, and he divided the light from the darkness, and he called the light day and the darkness night. There's a contrast already between light and dark. You know, where's that going to show up in other places? So we needed a light source on this ball of water rotating. We needed rotation, and we needed a light source. Where's the light? What's the light source? No sun yet. It's God, isn't it? In Revelation, the Lamb becomes the light of heaven. You're in no need of anything. It's his Shekinah glory shining down over the waters of the earth. Watch a brief video on water to understand the nature of water and just how special it is. And it's kind of the starting point for all things.
It covers nearly 3/4 of our planet, and it's essential for our existence. Water is a thing of wonder and inspiration. It also happens to be uniquely fit for creatures like us. One key feature of water that promotes life is its capacity to act as a universal solvent. Water can dissolve almost anything. This allows it to be an ideal carrier of the many chemicals and minerals we need for life. At the same time, water is less chemically reactive than many other solvents. Sulfuric acid can dissolve minerals, but it also destroys them by reacting with them and making them useless for life. Water dissolves minerals without destroying them, allowing them to carry out their life-giving functions. Water is thus an ideal solvent for life. Another important feature of water that enables life is its low viscosity or thickness. Different liquids can have radically different viscosities. Tar has a much higher viscosity than olive oil, and olive oil has a much higher viscosity than water. Water has one of the lowest viscosities of any common liquid, and its viscosity seems just right to facilitate life like ours. If the viscosity of water were any lower, like the viscosity of liquid hydrogen, the delicate microscopic structures in our cells wouldn't survive when subjected to outside forces. On the other hand, if water's viscosity were even slightly higher, the pumping of blood through the tiny capillaries which permeate all the organs in the body would be impossible, and our circulatory system wouldn't be able to supply enough oxygen or glucose to our muscle tissues for organisms like us to survive. In sum, the viscosity of water seems to be finely tuned for life like us. But perhaps the most striking features of water that make life possible are its thermal properties, which help us deal with the impact of heat. Many biochemical processes essential for life can only operate within a narrow band of temperatures. If the temperature is too high or too low, these biochemical processes cease to function, and life like ours becomes impossible. Thus, maintaining stable temperatures on the Earth and inside ourselves is essential for us to exist. Water is critical to maintaining stable temperatures. Water has a high heat capacity, which means that it can absorb large amounts of heat with only a relatively small increase in its temperature. You can see this in everyday life. Walk barefoot on sand on a hot summer's day, and you'll likely burn your feet. Place your feet in a swimming pool during the same summer day, and the water will only be pleasantly warm. Water's high capacity for absorbing heat helps both our planet and our bodies to maintain a stable temperature range.
You have to put a lot of energy into water to change the temperature. That's very convenient. It means it's very easy for warm-blooded organisms like ourselves to maintain body temperature. So that's a property of water which seems specifically fit for beings like ourselves. But there's another property of water which might even be more critical, and that is that, in fact, the evaporative cooling of water is one of the greatest of any fluid that's known.
The human metabolism produces large amounts of heat that needs to be discharged, or the body will overheat and die. The evaporation of water through perspiration is one of the key ways our body gets rid of excess heat. Water is especially fit for the task of cooling us because it absorbs a large amount of heat when it evaporates. In fact, more heat is absorbed by the evaporation of water than by the evaporation of almost any other known fluid at ambient temperatures and pressures. Water is uniquely suited to help us shed excess heat in hot climates. When the outside temperatures exceed the level of your body temperature, other ways of getting rid of heat won't work.
Because the only way to lose heat when the environment around you is reaching sort of 38 degrees centigrade is by evaporative cooling, because you can't radiate the heat out because the environment is 38 degrees, it's warmer than you, right? So it's absolutely critical to warm-blooded organisms like ourselves that the evaporative cooling of water is very high. It's one of the highest of any known common fluid.
The high evaporative cooling of water appears to benefit humans more than any other animal. Being relatively hairless, humans lose heat through evaporative cooling more efficiently than any other mammal. Consequently, in the heat of the day, humans can exert themselves continuously for longer periods of time than other mammals. Another intriguing thermal property of water is its peculiar behavior when freezing. Most liquids contract as they freeze, making their solid form denser than their liquid form. Unlike virtually every other liquid, however, water expands when it freezes, making frozen water less dense than liquid water. That's why ice floats. This special property of water helps preserve it in its liquid state. If water acted like most other liquids, oceans and lakes would freeze from the bottom up until there was no liquid left. Most of the Earth would be permanently encased in ice, making life as we know it impossible. Instead, when ice forms on the top of water, it creates a protective lid that insulates the water underneath it from the cold, keeping it in its liquid state.
And if you have a pond and have fish, you're really grateful that that's how water's made, right? If it froze from the bottom up, we wouldn't have anything, would we? The design of water itself in its, frankly, Trinitarian nature is so unique and so special that it's the first recipe that God uses in making life, in sustaining life. I think the solvent thing, though, is really important. So if you and I take a cup of sugar or a cup of salt and we mix it up in a gallon of water and we pour it down a trough and it rolls outside into a cookie sheet and the sun dries it all up, what do you have out there? Salt or sugar? It does not destroy what it dissolves. It's unique, and that's what we need in cells, right? That's what we need in tissue to survive. Our cells could not survive, would not be living, and could live very long at all without water. It's the very basic building block we need for all of this. Well, the other is light. And we talked about light, and we talked about it being Trinitarian in nature. But what's fascinating is that we see about Jesus speaking about this. And we saw it in John 1 as well, that light is literally what he calls himself. It's a life-giving element in and of itself, and it's Trinitarian. So you've got your red lamp for your lizards to keep them warm. That's the heat energy you can feel when you put your hand close to a lamp. You've got the visible spectrum, which is amazingly broken down into what? 7 colors. Are you kidding me? Yes, that's right. Then that's what you see everything by the light. The analogies are, go back and do, have fun with your Bible studies and stuff now when you consider this kind of component. And then what's interesting is the really quick waves on the other side, the ultraviolet, they're invisible, but they actually, just a very shallow band of this that we get through our atmosphere based on the design of our atmosphere, it kills germs. It kills bacteria. So during COVID, right, if you were on your facilities teams or help people or whatever, you may have carried around a little ultraviolet wand and you ran it over things, and what did that do? It killed the germs, naturally. What if it was just a little bit more ultraviolet radiation? It'd kill everything. You see the tuning that's involved here? And so what you've got here really are another yet Trinitarian nature. And you have this beautiful representation of God calling himself water and light. And it goes all the way back to the first verses of Genesis. Is that cool? Is God awesome or what? He is awesome. What about the atmosphere? I'll go ahead and blow this out real quick and we'll get up here with the other days. Atmospheric design, right? God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters and divide the waters from the waters, so waters below to waters above, so atmospheric water. There's something, enormous amount of water that persists in our atmosphere continually, and there's water in the oceans, and there's a separation of this. There's this moisture in our atmosphere, and he divided these, and they're under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so, and God called that firmament heaven, which is the face of the heavens where the birds fly and whatnot, our atmosphere. And there was a morning and an evening and the second day. Well, what's unique about our atmosphere is it's designed for life too. Perfectly designed, just like water is. Watch this.
Is the signature of complex life. If you're going to have complex life needing a lot of energy anywhere in the universe, you're going to have to use oxygen.
But for oxygen to be available for use, you need the right kind of planet and the right kind of atmosphere.
And you can only get atmospheres containing oxygen on planets roughly the size of the Earth. If they're too big, they retain primeval gases such as hydrogen and helium. If they're too small, they lose all their atmosphere. So you have to have planets roughly this size.
Getting the oxygen we need for life involves a stunning series of coincidences. On our planet, plants utilize the energy of sunlight to manufacture sugars and other essential organic compounds by a process known as photosynthesis. Photosynthesis converts radiant energy from the sun into a form of stored chemical energy that plants can use. But along the way, photosynthesis also generates an important waste product, oxygen. In other words, the same process that supplies the energy plants need just happens to also produce a waste product that supplies energy to humans and many other animals. If that weren't amazing enough, photosynthesis must have access to just the right kind of energy in order to work.
And what energy does the photosynthesis need? It's the very small region of the electromagnetic spectrum, which is the visual region. This is the region which powers photosynthesis. In fact, it's light energy. Light energy has the correct characteristics to raise the atoms of organic chemistry to levels for chemical interactions. So light is the right electromagnetic energy for photosynthesis. When you look at the sun, you find the sun turns out nearly all of its energy in the visible spectrum. So the sun is pouring out just the energy you need for photosynthesis. And so the radiant energy output of the sun happens to be in exactly the same region of the electromagnetic spectrum that you need for photosynthesis.
The Earth's atmosphere has just the right composition to allow the visible light we need to reach the surface of the planet, while largely absorbing many other kinds of radiation that are dangerous to life.
There are an awesome set of coincidences in the atmosphere which happen to allow the light of the sun to come right down to the surface of the Earth, where it can empower photosynthesis, where miraculously the atmosphere blocks out lots of other forms of radiation and allows the life-giving light to get to the planetary surface to allow photosynthesis to occur so you can have oxygen.
So, the design of the atmosphere actually allows for just the right spectrum of light to reach the planet's surface so that the plants can live, can have life with this light and with the water they get from our hydraulic cycles. And those two things together create what oxygen we have in our atmosphere today. What is our atmosphere? Well, let's talk about it real quick. This is what we're looking at today, post-flood, and we'll talk about what it was pre-flood tomorrow. It's a little interesting, but it's transparent, which allows for us to have some visible light. Its composition is mostly nitrogen, which is kind of like a filler. You know, if you ever make a meatloaf and you don't have a lot of hamburger, what do you put in it, guys? Yeah, filler, right? You put in oatmeal or some cracker crumbs, right? Well, think of nitrogen like that. It really is kind of a filler gas, but 20% is what we have in oxygen, and we don't have much else of anything, just a few traces of argon and helium, a few other things, but pretty much we're a nitrogen atmosphere with 20% oxygen. Anybody know what it might have been before the flood and when we had so much more vegetation than we have today? That number is going to be close to 32% before the flood, which explains a lot of problems that we see today that we wouldn't have had before it. Anything higher than 40, though, you would have combustion. So the NASA, the Apollo mission guys that died on the launch pad back in the past, it was an oxygen leak sparked by an electrical fire. And so that is very combustible. I mean, forests would actually combust up over 40% oxygen ratios. So we're talking about a very fine tuning component. The pressure is also tuned in such a way that it enables us to breathe and have these lung functions. A lot of nitrogen in our lungs fill in space with that oxygen to keep us going. Also, the evaporation or the hot water vapor provides this precise stability that we have. So water evaporation into our atmosphere actually kind of neutralizes and normalizes our temperatures. That's part of the design with that. 37.5 million billion gallons of water are in our atmosphere right now as vapor. And we think that number was higher as well prior to the flood and the catastrophe we had. This cycle means that some drop of water here in Wichita ends up somewhere else in the world, which ends up somewhere else in the world, which ends up somewhere else 40 times a year. That same water is being recycled in a very fine-tuned, beautiful system that incorporates both the use of light and heat energy for the evaporation components and water itself, which gives us our life, our cells, gives us our plants, gives us photosynthesis, gives us the oxygen normalization we have. All tuned up just the way that it is. And God said it was good, and he was right. It was. Now we get to a little bit more about this, talking about pre-flood, and we'll do more of this tomorrow. But we know this from the amber bubbles that we've extracted this oxygen from, and we can see in the past, pre-flood, that this is a number around 32% oxygen prior to. We also noted that our seas were warmer based on other factors, and we can see from the coal seams and whatnot how much more plant life we had. We also see stamps even for the Arctic areas and Antarctica that show fossilized coral which lived in the 74-degree temperatures. So we know our Earth was much warmer waters, had a lot more oxygen and a heck of a lot more plant life. And we'll talk about that more tomorrow when we get there. That's why fish were so large. That's why we find records of insects so large. That's why we find records of plants so large. It was perfect conditions prior to the catastrophe of the flood. But this is all part of this design of our atmosphere. We're up to day 3, and Ward Brown is going to come up.
I got him.
He's got him.
I got him. Give
You
that
got
to
him.
Dave.
All right, come on up. Here comes Ward. Take us through the plants.
Good job, good job.
I'm without mic, but I know you can hear me. This is Dr. Ward Brown, the veterinarian. Ward, tell us about your family. Where'd you grow up? Somebody is going to be from there or near there, I'll bet you.
I bet so too. Oh, thank you. Oberlin, Kansas. Who's the winner? Who's from there?
Come on out
Who?
northwest,
Huh?
northwest Kansas.
Huh? There's a winner.
Over here. Where are you from?
Hill City.
Hill City.
Well, that's not close enough for the $1 million prize. So, but it's in the neighborhood. Yeah, very good.
All right, tell us
Excellent.
about your family.
Okay. Well, my lovely wife, Sarah, is here with me tonight. 37 years.
You sure?
37. I had to do the math when Dan was to reel it off those vital numbers like that too. So yeah, 37 years coming up this July 20th.
Good. Where were you in the city of Oberlin or what?
I think I heard 38 over there on the sidelines.
You're in
Is it
trouble
30?
tonight.
Huh? This summer. Oh, 37 years last year.
Okay.
So it's. What, where did I live out in?
City.
Okay.
You grew up in Oberlin or you go up somewhere else?
You shouldn't ask a guy about his anniversary.
I know, that's
You just mess everything else up. So I grew up in the country, so I grew up on a farm, and the main thing was farming and cattle at that area. So.
And so tell them about, which a lot of us still haven't figured out, what we want to do when we grow up. When did you decide you wanted to be a vet?
It wasn't until 3rd grade. So there's 8 anxiety-filled years of my life of not knowing what I was going to do. But once I decided, then things after that was simple. Not easy, but simple. So that's, like growing up on the farm, being around animals, seeing the veterinarian come out and take care of them and do things on with the cattle out there, and also having several cats and always having dogs. Really got to really like animals, and that's what I decided that I'd like to pursue, be a veterinarian.
Tell us about schooling a little bit.
Schooling involved the first 2 years a one-room country schoolhouse.
All right, how many one-room school people do we
Yeah,
have?
how many more?
One. I was one.
Yeah,
Here's
so.
2. Back there, anybody? I thought I saw.
Yeah.
Here, anybody? Okay, over there. Carmen, really? I didn't know that.
Wow, I learned something. Very good. So, yeah, and
Is that
then
when you finished or stopped in the one-room school?
I quizzed out after that. So I quizzed out all the rest of the grades. So now, actually, being a farm boy, sometimes we will say that when someone sees you can do something kind of handy and things like that, and they'll say, "Well, you must have been a Boy Scout." I said, "No, quizzed out on the farm boy program." So, sorry about that. So,
Okay, so then
but
you went to
anyway.
Then you went to K-State, right?
Then I went to school, then K-State, and by the way, for the good basketball players, Steve forgot to mention K-State, that they can show up there and have a good team to play on as well. So yeah, so
Okay, so just so the group knows now, you were from an early age a young earth, 6 consecutive day, 24-hour day creationist from the time you were a youth, right?
Steve, I wish I could say that was right, but it's not. So I, because wanting to pursue to be a veterinarian, the thought in my mind was I need to be as good as I can be and as knowledgeable in science and and all the sciences and know those as well as I possibly can. And all of the science that was being taught to me was from a public school system, in which essentially was deep in evolution. There wasn't any countering of that on a creation standpoint in my life from school or from little church or anything like that either. So basically, I've continued on in the vein of science, evolution, and was deeply indoctrinated to be really a off the deep end of the pond scum pool evolutionist.
That was true even through not just undergrad at K-State, but through your graduate work.
Through most of the years of veterinary school
It
too.
was all evolution, right?
Yeah, so that's all I was taught,
Good.
and so.
Okay, Ward.
All
Take
right.
us through day 3.
Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for having us here, and also to listen to what we have to say. And one thing I do like to start out with saying is that we are wanting to help people to, one, learn that and know that and really believe it, is that basically science is catching up with Scripture. Scripture doesn't change. Science changes and it's catching up. And so, and the other thing is that through this, we hope that you'll be equipped to strengthen your faith, carry that on to other members of your family or people you care about, and to change their lives and their eternity. And so hopefully that you can be able to carry that on and to do that. And we like to sometimes hang the term creation evangelism upon that as well. So be encouraged and be thinking about that as we're going through listening to all this. So we come to day 3. Dan did a great job on telling us about day 1 and day 2 and the implications of what it means from the Scripture. And like I like to say is that before we start talking about what God did, let's read about what God wrote that he said he would do. Then God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the fruit tree that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, the herb that yields seed according to its kind, and the tree that yields fruit, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. So the evening and the morning was the third day. Kind is going to be an important word here that we will you'll be hearing more about that, and we'll be explaining that further a little bit later. We have on day 3, as we talk about an ecosystem and a magnetosphere going on here. Plus, we're also going to talk about the lands and plants as well. But on the ecosystem, we already have that Dan has talked about. The important things to be part of that would be the earth, the water, the light, the atmosphere, and the ecosystem is everything that works together on planet Earth. So it works together for our plants, our animals, and everything that how we impact it, how it impacts us, and all that whole system together. And we have the Earth has the highest density of any of the planets in our solar system, containing a large nickel iron core, which is responsible for our large magnetic field called the magnetosphere. So it's a process of the outer portion of the Earth and then the inner portion of the Earth, the iron core going inside of that, then creates this electromagnetic field around the Earth. And it has then also protective capabilities to prevent too much of the rays, in which are come the atmospheric rays from the outer areas coming into the Earth, and it helps filter those out and protects the Earth. So the magnetosphere is an important thing. This unique magnetic field surrounding the Earth produces the Van Allen radiation shield, which protects Earth from radiation bombardment that otherwise would instantly destroy life on Earth. So that field is out there and taking care of us, and it's all working together with the ecosystem that is around us at all times. Here's a little video of what it shows as there is protecting the Earth, as it has a lot of radiation affecting it. If you're a Star Wars fan, it's kind of like a force shield. So that's going on, but then also to talk about the things which I was afraid that Dan's going to steal the thunder on this, was that he was talking about photosynthesis. And so that was, you need light for photosynthesis to take place, but you also need something that has the green chlorophyll in it before that can occur. And so Dan was talking ahead of himself, I thought, because there weren't any plants yet to produce any oxygen. But the photosynthesis is an amazing process. If you haven't sat down and thought about that recently, it is something, if you think through it on what you're learning here and how it all works together with the creation and how God created things to work together, how it is by design. It's by an intelligent engineer that has designed this and put it in place and planned it. And it didn't just happen by accident or happen by chance. So it's a design process that is taking place. And we have the photosynthesis, produce oxygen, and then also those plants are going to be using the light and the water, the nutrients in the soil, and it's going to be using that then to produce its foliage, and going to be producing seeds. And inside of those seeds, it's an amazing package of information, the DNA in those seeds. So you have all of that working together. Let's watch this little video here about dandelions.
Sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
You're watching the launch of 1,000 flying machines, each exquisitely crafted to airdrop life throughout the Earth. A dandelion puff exists for one crucial purpose: to disperse the flower's seeds as far as possible from the parent plant. Its component parts are well suited for the task. Dozens of individual seeds are attached to the head of this flower. Each is covered with microscopic hooks that will eventually help anchor them to fertile soil. A thin stem elevates a cluster of bristles called the pappus, and these filaments are engineered to respond to variations in the weather. On a rainy morning, the moist, heavy air makes extended flight all but impossible. Every pappus reacts by closing tightly. But later in the day, when the air dries out and the temperature warms, the reaction is quickly reversed in preparation for takeoff. Under optimal conditions, a seed can stay aloft for more than 10 miles. At the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, a team of engineers discovered how these tiny mechanisms fly so well. Using a vertical wind tunnel, they photographed the dynamics of airflow around the seed. When currents passed between the bristles, a swirling whirlpool called a vortex ring formed just above the pappus. In nature, this pocket of low pressure sucks the parachute upward and stabilizes its movement as it's carried by the wind. Other studies have also revealed that the vortex's shape and ability to maintain its position are determined by the size and quantity of the bristles and the amount of empty space between them. Simulation models demonstrate that in a biological structure this small, the finely tuned airflow required for flight is the product of circular geometry with 92% open space and 100 thread-like filaments. Not surprisingly, that's the blueprint for the pappus of a typical dandelion seed. How well does this technology work? When compared to a conventional parachute, the pappus is at least 4 times more efficient at maintaining altitude and slowing the seed's descent to Earth. Innovation, foresight, and world-class engineering, all displayed in living wonders so common and familiar, we pass them by each day without a glance or second thought.
Then that is, also we're going to have, remember the word kind and design. We're going to be talking about those more as we go through the days of creation here. So how many of you thought it would be easy or thinks it's going to be easy, or now you understand why it's not easy to win the battle completely with dandelions? It's because basically you're fighting God's design is what you're fighting there. So, and part of the one of the things of which I heard someone say is that it's cut a little off the subject, but it's free. Dandelions are found in I think every single state of the United States, Canada and Alaska as well, and basically they're kind of like God's vegetable garden for people who recognize that they are good for leafy vegetables for eating. And so it's something in which God's out there trying to provide that for us, but we're trying to kill it. So so maybe they aren't really a curse. So that's isn't that fascinating about the design? And that's just one small example of an amazing array of designs that we see in nature. And seeds according to its kind. Here's another one.
Want to see something that'll make your eyes pop right out of your head? Watch closely. These remarkable mechanisms, seldom observed at this magnification, are engineered and constructed to help ensure life on Earth. They are biological wonders, commonplace but extraordinary. Devoid of muscle tissue, yet surprisingly dynamic. And their mobility has fascinated researchers from South Carolina to South Korea. This story begins with these small lavender flowers. The plant's scientific name is Erodium cicuterium, but it's commonly known as storksbill. A week after blossoming, the petals wither to reveal these green striped pods. Inside their protective walls, 5 seeds quickly develop. Each seed is attached to a slender tail called an awn, and 5 awns per pod cluster together to form these narrow pointed extensions that measure 1 to 3 inches and resemble, you guessed it, the bill of a stork. Later, the pods die back to display their contents. 5 exquisite packages of life, signed, sealed, and ready for delivery. The storksbill now awaits the most explosive stage in its life cycle. As the seeds mature, the awns dry out and contract, In the process, elastic energy builds within them to the breaking point. The extreme torque generated by the twisting ons catapults the ripened seeds away from the parent plant. Now things really get interesting. Once on the ground, the on reacts to humidity and quickly changes shape. Its cells are hygroscopic, so even though they're dead, they still respond to variations in the weather. On a dry afternoon, the cells shrink and the on coils tightly. But when the humidity rises, the moist air triggers an opposite reaction and the on uncoils. These alternating cycles of contraction and release produce motor action that causes the on shaft, tail, and fine hairs to move the seed on its slow, relentless march. If the seed head locates a small hole or crack, it enters, then twists and burrows like a miniature bulldozer. Okay, now freeze the action right here. I want to show you why that seed's outer casing is an absolute masterpiece. Just look at its shape, sleek, tapered, and perfect for pushing its way into narrow spaces. And that hook on the tip, it anchors the seed while it's drilling into the soil. Those rows of microscopic hairs are aligned to help drive it forward, even in rough terrain. While large cavities on top of the case collect moisture that may help germinate the seed inside. This is a complete package, with every module working together, so the seed can literally plant itself. But there's more on display here than just a fascinating biological system. Consider this. Our world is filled with superb technology, highly efficient devices no one would reasonably attribute to chance or any random process. Instead, we universally recognize these machines as the products of purpose, design, and sophisticated engineering. So why can't similar logic be applied to nature? When we objectively study a mechanism like this, with an array of integrated components that result in nothing less than the generation of new life, there is only one realistic explanation for its being. The foresight and ingenuity of a mind that exists outside the natural world and created everything within it.
Kind of powerful that a seed could be able to do that, and we have a worldview in which says that just happened by chance, and that then we have a scriptures from our Father in heaven, our Creator, that says, no, I did that. I designed that. I am the one which put these seeds into the ground like this, through this mechanism. For those which can recognize that, it doesn't have, you don't have to have some type of a multi-alphabetical degree to be able to understand that. Today, you have to have, sometimes the multi-alphabetical degree and layers in which then turns turns the mind around and changes the thinking. So anymore in the worldview. So so that is the amazing thing with this, which I want you to understand, is that with design, with God's purpose involved, and with intelligence behind it, is a rational, logical explanation versus just chance. The other thing, before we go to break here. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought that might have been a break.
Yeah, I think it was at some other.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm trained so well to know that when there's the slide comes up and when there's going to be a breaking point coming up, but day 3 is not the end of the ecological system. That's the beginning of it there. Actually, the beginning of it was on day 1, but it's going to keep building as we talk more and more about the other days coming up. So, okay.
All right.
Okay.
David Penny, red sweater, stand up. All right, David. Yeah. Okay, Dave. Briefly.
Okay.
Tell us about your family, and your wife is sitting here. I'm hoping you, with your math mind, you calculated how long you've been. You don't have to say that. I'll save you on that.
Okay. I grew up in Emporia, Kansas. Was born in Lawrence, and we live there now. Carmen's my wife right here. Oh, you want to hold your hand now? We've been married more than 40 years, and we've survived. And we have.
I mean, she's survived.
Yeah, that's right. We have 5 children, 4 boys and 1 girl. And by marrying up, my kids came out real smart. So we've had a tough time corralling them, and they've done very well academically. I was raised in a fairly intelligent family of doctors and engineers, good engineers. And the problem was, though I was indoctrinated at a very young age into this evolution stuff and old universe stuff, and it's been a brutal process for me to extract myself from that. What helped was when I went to MIT, I was taught very well at a very high level physics, and it was the undoing of my evolutionary principles. I got in a heated discussion. One guy raised to even through MIT, and I went to seminary, and I was there, ardent evolution at Dallas Seminary, if you can believe it. First year, and this guy he says, well, Dave, how do you're an evolutionist, how do you get this together with the second law? And we'll talk about this law, and it's the most powerful law in physics. It's called the law of increasing entropy or disorder. Anyway, and I said, well, that's easy, and then I went back and worked, and my whole world was destroyed. You can't go, nothing in the universe is going uphill. Nothing's becoming more ordered on itself. You can produce order, but you got to produce a lot of disorder to get there. A car doesn't come cheap. They talk about wind energy being free. It's not free. You expend a whole lot more energy than you get out of the system.
Okay, and so that's about the family. There you go.
Yeah.
So now, Dave, you sort of alluded to, but let's be a little clearer so they understand that you're not just some fly-by-night here.
Right.
Yeah, you're the least educated of the group, and you graduated from where?
MIT, and then Dallas.
Wait a minute, and what did you graduate with?
It was in, it was called mechanical engineering, but it was in really mathematics, designing physical systems.
Okay.
And I ended up working in the Apollo project for
Okay, and then after that, you went to seminary. Where'd you go to seminary?
I became a believer at MIT, if you can believe that. And then I went to,
Crusade for Christ.
yeah, and I went to Dallas Seminary for 4 years in Greek and Hebrew, and so I could get my life straightened out and my views straightened out. We had some very good professors, by the way.
Yeah, tell them a few of the professors that you studied under.
Like Unger of Unger's Bible Dictionary. We had Charles Ryrie. We had Howard Hendricks. We had John Pentecost, Toussaint, Walford. A good friend of mine, Art Farstad, ended up being the general editor of the New King James Bible. If you look in there, it'll be Art Farstead. I was able to rub shoulders. I didn't know. I didn't come from a Christian background. I didn't know what I was wandering into, and they almost killed me that first year. I got buried.
Okay, and let's make clear now, we got another guy who's an evolutionist. Came through school and is an evolutionist, and now he's a young earth creationist. So that's three of these guys, all the same. They understand evolution, and they came out of it because the science really isn't there. Because they're scientists. They've all made their living through science. So they like science, they just like good science. They don't like theoretical stuff necessarily. So anyway, are you ready to go through day 4?
This is day 4.
You have 23 minutes till 8 o'clock because they're tired and ready to go take a break, hit the restroom, and get something to eat.
Okay,
Can you
okay,
do
okay.
it?
Yeah, I'll try.
All
I'll
right,
try.
fine. I'll give you a signal over here with 5 minutes to go.
Got to push the right buttons. This is the 4th day. Up to this point, there's been the only light in the universe has been the Lord giving light. And by the way, like you said in the Revelation, there's no sun or moon or stars as far as we know. God's the light at that point again. So we have a period of time of history where we have a sun, moon, and stars. And it says here, then God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night. Do you remember at the beginning when he's in the first day, he says day and night, and he put the light there, but he's the light. And he's going to put these lights in the firmament, and he says, and let them be for signs and seasons and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth. And it was so. So then God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. Now, by the way, do you ever think of how do we measure time? It's all done by the celestial bodies. What determines a day? It's the rotation of the earth. What determines a year? Going around the sun. What determines our seasons? The fact that the earth is fixed at 23.5 degrees so that we're closer to the sun in the north in the summertime and further away in the wintertime. And so we have our seasons, 4 seasons. Now at the equator, they don't have so many seasons. But all these things, God's giving us so we feel time. Well, I'm not going to tell you, but in the space program, they put people in closed environments, and so they can't get input from things. They went crazy because there was no sense of time. There was no sense of feeling or anything. So God's generously put this. But then it says also, as an afterthought, he made the stars also. Whoa! If you know anything about cosmology, that's the master, that's the senior understatement. God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth and to rule over the day and over the night and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So everything was, morning and evening was the 4th day. Now Isaiah 40, it says, who has measured the waters in the palm of his hand, or the breadth of his hand marked out the heavens? I mean, this is stunning. Therefore, they think now, it used to be 100 billion galaxies, they thought. Now they're up with the new telescopes that it's probably closer to 10 trillion galaxies. We live in one galaxy, the Milky Way. You know how many stars are in the Milky Way? 200 billion. You know what's in the average galaxy, they estimate? 100 billion. So you got 10 trillion galaxies, each with 100 billion stars in each one. All at once. All in one deal. I don't have time to get into it, but the Big Bang is the craziest, stupidest idea. It breaks every physical law. You can't blow out to those dimensions and send light back in 50 billion years. It's just not even possible. They'll all be burnt out by that time. We know because they're going off all the novas and supernovas.
Tell them what Psalm says about these stars. What did he do?
He knows the names of every one of them.
Oh my goodness.
Woo!
He named them all.
Yeah. And you know what? You know, our sun is a star. You're talking about stars out there, making stars. You have to have more energy, and we'll talk about that later. You know what it takes to put a star together, the energy? You have to take all the energy equivalent that it'll ever give off in its lifetime and bring it back to its beginning point so it can go out. That's stunning. This thing will blow your mind when you get to, we walk around the little world driving our cars and doing this, that, and the other thing during lifetime and don't even realize we're sitting here among 7 billion people on the face of the earth, and we're on just one planet, around one star. The numbers are just mind-boggling. You get into the numbers. This is the number of stars that we can see. We can't even see the end of the universe out there with these big telescopes, the Hubble and the James Webb. That's one with 24 zeros behind it. That's bigger than the national budget or deficit. And that's in dollars, our budget. This is in stars. What you have here is how big is the universe? I want you to watch a short deal.
These are fingerprints of adult human beings. Each measures approximately 1/2 by 3/4 of an inch. Now, you're probably wondering why this information is of any significance. Well, when coupled with some of the greatest astronomy in history, the tip of your finger can help reveal a breathtaking perspective of the universe. Just stay with me for a minute, and I think you'll see what I mean. In April 1990, the Space Shuttle Discovery transported and positioned the Hubble Space Telescope 350 miles from Earth. There, orbiting above the turbulence of our atmosphere, the Hubble has captured unprecedented views of the universe for the past 3 decades. Its gallery includes planets and nebulae, galactic collisions, supernovas, and extraordinary surveys of deep space that have opened new doors to understanding the size and structure of the cosmos. On May 2nd, 2019, an international team of astronomers released a new Hubble image that captured the imagination of the world. They called it the Hubble Legacy Field. For 250 days, over a period of 16 years, the telescope was aimed at one sliver of sky near the Fornax constellation in the southern hemisphere. In all, 7,500 exposures of this region of space, long thought to be relatively empty, were captured by the Hubble cameras. Later, they were assembled into the most detailed view of the cosmos ever explored. At least 265,000 galaxies were documented, including many so faint and distant their light measured just 1/10,000,000th of the brightness the human eye can see. Okay, now here's where your fingertip comes into play. From Earth, you can cover the entire area photographed by the Hubble astronomers, including its estimated 265,000 galaxies, with the tip of your index finger held at arm's length. And that section of space we just blocked out? It represents our view of about 1/240,000th of the entire night sky. The implications are humbling. For almost every one of those 240,000 fingertip-sized parcels of sky includes at least 250,000 galaxies. Wow.
Let me blow this up a little bit for you. This was done with the Hubble. This is dated. Yeah. The Jack Webb, you can crank that up 100 times. That thumbprint, they said it was, what, 250,000? You're talking about 25 million in that thumbprint from what and we haven't seen the end of it yet. That's who we're dealing with. You think of God dealing with Moses and things, and you'd say, who was he dealing with? Moses didn't have an idea. We don't have an idea. This thing is just, it's off the charts. It's just, we cannot even comprehend who we're dealing with that created these things that are dying. We're going to find out tomorrow. He did it all in 6 days, and it's in the process of all burning out. The stars are giving off energy they'll never get back, and he did it all at once. Was he tired after this? No. I get to do work and I get tired. He's not tired. He has that power with a spoken word. He didn't have a little factory with elves doing this. He just speaks in these things. That's who, when we talk about salvation and everything, we have to understand who we're dealing with. I mean, we think we're big stuff. When you begin to understand that, we can talk about that later. We're just made out of about $25 worth of dirt. And about 60 to 70% of it's water. That comes in free. You know, so we're not worth very much, you know. Yeah, I mean, we're 7 billion people, and what are we worth? I mean, you know, in our galaxy, with 200 billion stars and 7 billion people, what does that work out? 30 stars in our galaxy for every man, woman, and child. 30 stars for everyone on the face of the earth. Well, just multiply that by 10 trillion. It's just off the charts. So what we're dealing with here is a stunning thing. I mean, and he made the stars also. What an understatement. You have a cause and effect for everything. For every material effect, there's a cause that is greater than the effect before it. It's a law called the law of causality. It's the most important law in physics because for every effect that we have, we base a cause. The scientific method is built upon that. If you give the same conditions, you'll always get the same results because you've set the thing in motion. And like a watch, you got a watchmaker, and he's always more complex than the thing he's built. Why? Because we know there's a cause for it. Have I ever met the watchmaker that made the watch? No. Have I ever seen his watch factory? No. But I know there's one out there. That watch didn't just appear out of nothing. So that's what we have, cause and effect. Stephen Hawking. Now listen, these are guys that are atheists. And they go to extreme deals. They have trouble with, because they're atheists, with God creating the whole universe. But listen to what they say. Bodies such as the stars and black holes cannot appear out of nothing, but the universe can. What are we talking about? What kind of logic is that? Or here's Dawkins, he's another atheist. It's common sense that you can't get something for nothing. Something pretty mysterious had to have given rise to the origin of the life in the universe. So, what's he say is the cause? Well, it just happened. It's mysterious. I mean, these are intelligent people. But when you're willfully blind, like Romans 1 says, you believe foolish things. And in the end times, God's going to send them a delusion because people don't want to believe the truth. Things that are very obvious. You got a universe out there. What do you think happened? Where do you think it came from? This is
Same year Time featured its now famous headline, the astronomer Carl Sagan announced that there were 2 necessary criteria for a planet to support life: the right kind of star and a planet the right distance from that star. Given the roughly octillion planets in the universe, that's 1 followed by 24 zeros, there should have been about septillion planets, that's 1 followed by 21 zeros, capable of supporting life. With such spectacular odds, scientists were optimistic that the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, known by its initials SETI, an ambitious project launched in the 1960s, was sure to turn up something soon. With a vast radio telescopic network, scientists listened for signals that resembled coded intelligence. But as the years passed, the silence from the universe was deafening. As of 2014, researchers have discovered precisely bupkis, nada, zilch, which is to say zero followed by an infinite number of zeros. What happened? As our knowledge of the universe increased, it became clear that there were, in fact, far more factors necessary for life, let alone intelligent life, than Sagan supposed. His two parameters grew to 10, then 20, and then 50, which meant that the number of potentially life-supporting planets decreased accordingly. The number dropped to a few thousand planets and kept on plummeting. Even SETI proponents acknowledged the problem. Peter Schenkel wrote in a 2006 piece for Skeptical Inquirer, a magazine that strongly affirms atheism, "In light of new findings and insights, we should quietly admit that the early estimates may no longer be tenable." Today, there are more than 200 known parameters necessary for a planet to support life, every single one of which must be perfectly met or the whole thing falls apart. For example, without a massive gravity-rich planet like Jupiter nearby to draw away asteroids, Earth would be more like an interstellar dartboard than the verdant orb that it is. Simply put, the odds against life in the universe are astonishing. Yet, here we are, not only existing, but talking about existing. What can account for it? Can every one of those many parameters have been perfectly met by accident? At what point is it fair to admit that it is science itself that suggests that we cannot be the result of random forces? Doesn't assuming that an intelligence created these perfect conditions in fact require far less faith than believing that a life-sustaining Earth just happened to beat the inconceivable odds? But wait, there's more. The fine-tuning necessary for life to exist on a planet is nothing compared with the fine-tuning required for the universe to exist at all. For example, astrophysicists now know that the values of the four fundamental forces, gravity, the electromagnetic force, and the strong and weak nuclear forces, were determined less than 1/1,000,000th of a second after the Big Bang. Alter any one of these four values ever so slightly, and the universe as we know it could not exist. For instance, if the ratio between the strong nuclear force and the electromagnetic force had been off by the tiniest fraction of the tiniest inconceivable fraction, then no stars could have formed at all. Multiply that single parameter by all the other necessary conditions, and the odds against the universe existing are so heart-stoppingly astronomical that the notion that it all just happened defies common sense. It would be like tossing a coin and having it come up heads 10 quintillion times in a row. I don't think so. Fred Hoyle, the astronomer who coined the term Big Bang, said that his atheism was greatly shaken by these developments. One of the world's most renowned theoretical physicists, Paul Davies, has said that the appearance of design is overwhelming. Even the late Christopher Hitchens, one of atheism's most aggressive proponents, conceded that without question the fine-tuning argument was the most powerful argument of the other side. Oxford University professor of mathematics, Dr. John Lennox, has said, "The more we get to know about our universe, the more the hypothesis that there is a creator gains in credibility as the best explanation of why we are here." The greatest miracle of all time is the universe. It is the miracle of all miracles, one that inescapably points to something or someone beyond itself.
Stunning, isn't it? This is what a beautiful shots of the Hubble. Isn't that beautiful? Now it's coded, but it's using the radiation from there to assign colors to it. Beautiful, just beyond great minds. It says every material effect, as we said, a cause is greater than the effect, must come before it. And so we have in the material universe, there must be, the agent had to be a non-material. We'll explain that later. It's outside the natural laws to govern the effect of creating the universe. It must be above the natural laws and higher in power than the material itself. And it must be before the created material in effect. It must exist before this effect. It's like Romans 1, as I cited. For since the creation of the world, his invisible things, now listen to this, invisible characteristics are clearly seen, being understood by what? The things that are made that we can see. Invisible by the things that are made? Yeah. So, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. This will be the next session, but what you'll see is as you get that's what, as my science killed when I understood the laws, it killed my beliefs in evolution, in old universe cosmology. It killed my whole deal of the Big Bang. At that time, there was a steady state ideas of Frederick Hoyle. They all get destroyed by science. It's just that we got to get good science out there. So, like they said, the science has got to catch up with the scriptures.
All right, David, let's have a round of applause. This is about like herding cats. Herding cats here. We're herding cats, not bad. A couple hundred people. I know she's not in here, but our red hot spark plug, Lisa Ritchie. Lisa, let's have a round of applause. She took care of that old organization out there, so you got something. So this is for Lisa, but she can't hear it. There's Lisa coming in the door. Yes, there she is. Yeah, way to go. All right, good job. Okay, we're going to just take 2 or 3 questions, and I'm going to try and get the teachers to be brief because they can go and go on questions, especially Dave, which we appreciate because everything he says is important, but he just has so many important things to say. So anyway, how about a question or 2 that's significant on one of the topics that we had here yet? Okay, Sai.
It may be a better question for tomorrow.
A better question for tomorrow. You want?
What was the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere pre-flood?
Oh, CO2. Yeah, that's tomorrow. But we do have the answer.
We do.
I think we do, don't we?
Yeah, we have an answer.
Yeah, we have an answer. Good. Okay, another question. Another question. Somebody? How do you? Okay, how do we address the woke crowd? Who wants to take that?
It's difficult because they won't come up for a debate or discussion. They've closed the universities and the churches to any discussion.
As I told the kids today, another reason that we can't get any traction in the scientific world is that it's a money issue. If you don't toe the line, and the line is evolution, etc., you get no funding from the government, and that's what keeps all of these universities going big time. And if you do not toe the line, and you're a teacher or professor, you're out of there. For the most part, that happens all the time. You hear it, you read about it. Professors that are not able to go, and there are other reasons. Question over here, ma'am. Are we going to address global warming? Dave, be careful now.
Oh, well, let's do that tomorrow.
Okay. Yes, we will, I guess. Yeah,
That's a
global
CO2 question.
Okay, over here. Yes, ma'am.
Are they going to tell us how they changed from being an evolutionist to a creationist?
How you guys going to tell them how that happened, that you went from an evolutionist to a creationist?
Ward?
Yes. You want to hear that now?
Quickly.
Or again? Sure. Okay. And, we keep putting it off till tomorrow. So, well, for me, it was the question of the process of evolution, saying that their changes are taking place because of mutations and natural selection. And that is what has caused the improvement from the very, very single-celled, simple organisms to us as very complicated human beings. So there is a big difference of genetic information in between a very simple-celled organism versus us as complicated human beings. So the question is that where did that information come from to be able to, for that mutation, to be able to add beneficial information to then make a jump to more complicated organisms, individuals, animals, creatures, whatever, over time. So what's your favorite mutation that has added the beneficial information in which then would substantiate that particular mechanism? And there isn't one. So it's the mutations are not generally going to be causing something beneficial. 99.9% of mutations are a problem. 99.9% of mutations are usually a loss of information. So it's not a gain of information. We do not observe that mutations add beneficial information. So that's what information is, the underlying reason for me.
Yeah, let me add just a very simple example of that. For me, George, this isn't a new problem of going from disorder to order. George Bernard Shaw said, "You give me 1,000,000 monkeys typing randomly on a typewriter, and they'll play a type of play of Shakespeare." Well, he's a playwright. Well, anyway, another friend of mine, and we took the play of Othello. It's a Shakespearean play, and it begins with 3 4-letter words. But for the sake of argument, we said, let's take it 4 4-letter words. How long would it take for 1,000,000 monkeys typing randomly on a keyboard to get that first 4 words in the play of Othello? Well, guess you type, and they're typing 100 words per minute, okay, randomly. And you work out what's the probability of getting the first word or 4 letters in sequence somewhere in there. Just take a shot. 2 seconds. Okay, let's double it. 2 words, 8 letters in sequence. 5 minutes. Let's double it again. 4 words, 16 letters in sequence. It's 100 million years. See, the problem is your complexity goes up. It goes up as the powers. But the collisions of getting these things are just arithmetic, you know. So it becomes, it's easier to go, it's more difficult to go from an ape's DNA to a human DNA than it is from random atoms to an ape's DNA. It's just crazy.
I think one of the things that since I've been doing this 30 times, I listen to these guys. I like with Ward, he said he went to college once he kind of figured things out, and he approached some of his professors, and he said, now, okay, how does this exactly work that we get from here to here in evolution? And they said, well, if you'll just wait a while, when you get to your veterinarian training, those professors will tell you. So he got there and he asked a few questions. Am I telling this correctly? Pretty correctly?
Yeah, pretty correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good
and
enough for
they
Hollywood.
go, well, you need to. What do they say even at the level at the doctoral degree level? They kept.
Oh, it was still an indication of that I did not understand. It was my lack of understanding, and that there's and it be assured that it is the proper mechanism for things to occur. So, and it basically, and
yeah,
just
not smart enough.
Just not
That's
smart
what they're
enough
saying.
yet. So it really was not able to ever achieve an answer, to that question that was satisfactory. So, so that's So
Okay.
the realization was that that evolution is a faith system without hope.
Okay, so we need to go on to day 5, but I want to say one more thing to you. I'll just feed you a little information. We've been doing this about 7, 8 years now. We do 3 or 4 of these a year, and we started out putting the scriptures up on the screen, but we wouldn't read them because we thought, it takes time, and you all can read. But then we realized through Dan, who read us a scripture, and it says that that no scripture, if you read it, will return what? And so the reason that these guys, they don't think that they know you can read, but we're wanting to make sure that we're expressing God's word, because those words are going to be working in you. And so that's why we take the time to do that. Day 5, Ward Brown.
Okay, very good. Glad to see that looks like everyone, or most everyone, has returned after the break. So appreciate that very much. There's a question about how do you watch this program that's streaming. Is this live streaming now, Mark? Is it now? It is? Okay, very good. So I'm all of a sudden really nervous. But no, but to see this live streaming, say if you can't come back tomorrow, or if you know someone else, or if you want to call someone up or something, hey, watch these guys or whatever. The YouTube channel, it's called Bible Truth in Prophecy, is where this is being live streamed to at this point in time. So once again, Bible, truth, N-I-N, prophecy, YouTube channel. Okay? All right. Okay, let's go on to day 5 here. And so let's talk about this day in creation. So as we will usually start out then, we will then, first things first, let's, before we start talking about what God did and what we think about what God did, let's read what God said he would do. In Genesis, for the 5th day, it says, "Then God said, let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens. So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded, according to their kind, and every winged creature according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." So the evening and the day, 5th day. Evening and the morning, the 5th day. So you see some words there's popping up here again. The kinds are showing up. And we'll talk more about that. It's really be very important when we're talking about the ark and how it can get the appropriate number of animals on the ark. But kinds are going to be those genetically related that basically two of a kind are going to be able to come together, reproduce, and have an offspring. That's the very, very basic definition of kind. And so dog kind is going to mate with a dog kind and have dogs. So they aren't going to produce another kind. And that is, there's a line, a demarcation, which God has provided there. And it is a very important line to keep in mind. So the fish and the sea creatures, there's an amazing amount of varied life, a diversity of life taking place underneath the waters, in which escapes our daily observation of what's going on. Everything from very, very small creatures such as plankton to huge creatures such as whales, and everything in between. There's going to be those which have no skeleton, hardly any bones at all. They're mostly just jelly, such as jellyfish, squid, octopus, those type of creatures. To those in which maybe they still don't have much in the way of skeletal structure, strength to their body, but they're still going to have an exoskeleton, such as clams are going to be there in the oceans. Then you have those which are vertebrates, which are going to have a vertebral system. And that is going to be a huge number of creatures there in the ocean as well, underneath the waters and the seas and the lakes and things to that effect. So there's a lot of varied life that takes place underneath the surface there. Our other ones which are mentioned on day 5, besides our sea creatures, we also have our birds. And the unique situation, the unique characteristics that's within the birds physically, we're going to look at here in this one video. But so we're going to watch this just for a little bit.
This is a remarkable balance that the bird has to maintain between structural strength of the bone and the needs for flight.
In order to fly, a bird must be strong enough to free its body from the bonds of gravity and light enough to remain suspended in the air. Its skeletal system is crucial to success. This adult pelican weighs more than 20 pounds and has the strength to fly hundreds of miles before landing. Yet its entire skeleton weighs less than 30 ounces. How? The majority of the bird's bones are hollow and reinforced by an internal network of girders and struts. The result is a light but durable framework, able to withstand the constant stress of flapping, takeoffs, and landings.
Feathers do a lot of different things really, really well, and they're very specialized in the way they're designed.
Birds are covered by several types of feathers. Closest to the skin, a soft, thick coat of down provides excellent insulation. And the down is encased by multiple layers of contour and primary feathers. These outer layers give a bird its streamlined shape, protection from moisture, and the ability to maneuver freely in the air. To do so, they must be light, strong, and extremely flexible. When a Canadian goose approaches a pond, the long primary feathers on its wingtips bend and twist open like a Venetian blind. Simultaneously, the alula, 3 feathers attached to a small bone, is raised to create a slot that alters the path of turbulent air rushing over the wing. The precise actions of these mechanisms prevent stalling while slowing the bird's descent for a controlled, soft landing.
You're going to need specialized muscles to move those wings, so your pectoral muscles in particular are going to be very large.
Hundreds of muscles, tendons, and ligaments power a diverse range of wing movements. The centerpieces of this system are the flight muscles. Pectoralis major, and beneath it, supracoracoideus. Together, they form the engines of avian flight. When the pectoral muscles contract, they pull the humerus bone in each wing down, creating thrust and lift. In immediate response, the supracoracoideus, connected by a tendon to the top of the humerus, works like a pulley to lift the wing every time the muscle contracts.
This is another terrific design because this pulley system eliminates the need for a large, heavy muscle above the shoulder to lift the wing back up. Instead, the flight muscles are all below the wings, where they help create a compact center of gravity that really stabilizes the bird's body in the air.
Everything on a bird is integrated together so that flight is possible. Everything that possibly can be reduced in weight is reduced. Everything that can be moved towards the center of mass is moved. All of these engineering compromises, all of these refinements, it's multiple systems working together perfectly in a coordinated way all at once. And when you put that puzzle together and the pieces fit in exactly the right way, then boom, you have the magic and the birds can fly.
He said magic, but actually it's our creator, designer intended it that way. And so what a better place, better city to talk about flight, and that's known for having the heritage of the aeronautical engine engineering and the companies here in Wichita. So when a plane that a whole team of aeronautical engineers have worked on, and then they design it, and then put all the systems together to make it work, then when it takes off, is their first impression is that, oh, that happened by chance. That was magic. Or is their impression going to be is that, yeah, that was engineered to be that way. So birds being able to fly, we rationally, logically would think as believers that that was the way they were designed to be. That was something in which our Creator God put into their systems and made flight to be possible. We'll look at a couple of birds that are kind of some extremes within their abilities, what birds can do. We'll look at the first, which would be the Arctic tern, in which they are going to be some of the high mileage type of birds that we see. Probably the highest mileage bird per year that we would see. Let me just read this. You may not be able to see it very well in the back, but this right here says they can navigate successfully to and from their starting point 50,000 miles a year. Only bird that can hover aerodynamically other than hummingbirds. The Arctic tern travels an estimated 1.5 million miles over their lifetime, which equals 3 trips to the moon. And those are just some of the few fascinating things about them. If you read about them, you'll see some other fascinating issues with them as well, with how they can fly that far, going from one pole to the other pole, and then going back as well, doing that trip twice a year. So another extreme is a bird that flies. How many miles does this bird fly in the air? This one goes 0, but can be able to, the penguin is able to dive and swim better than an Arctic tern could ever think about diving and swimming. So the penguins, they're a flightless bird, of course, and each has a distinct call which allows them to find young among thousands that are gathered together. You've probably seen those nature films where there's a mass of penguins on the ice. Everyone looks the same, but mom and baby get matched up on a regular basis. They fluff their feathers while swimming to release bubbles, which reduces water viscosity and increases their speed. They can dive over 1,850 feet deep, enabled by their solid bone design to avoid the burial trauma, and they have a slowed heart rate to 15 beats per minute, shutting down non-essential organs up to 22 minutes underwater. So God provided not only uniqueness within the birds and their flying ability, but major variability within that particular kind, and the different kinds of birds there which we have. So we'll see another video here, which is not going to talk about just individual characteristics, but let's look at this video about starlings, and we'll see something of which happens as a group. So watch this.
This is a European starling. Fully grown, it stands 8 inches tall and weighs about 3 ounces. It's a common, ordinary little bird that spends most of the day doing common, ordinary things that hardly anyone notices. Searching for bugs, hanging out with friends, playing in the water, chirping loudly, and taking care of the kids. But at twilight, on winter evenings in Europe and North America, the curtain rises on an incredible performance and our run-of-the-mill little starling becomes a superstar. From November to March, thousands of starlings congregate an hour before sunset to form enormous flocks that can turn the skies into living works of abstract art. Researchers have proposed multiple theories for this extraordinary behavior. These soaring ballets may be an effort to confuse and drive off predators, or perhaps they're an elaborate means of communication, or just a good way to keep warm. But regardless of their purpose, it is a mesmerizing air show that evokes an obvious question. How do so many birds, flying at speeds of almost 50 miles an hour, avoid collision while maintaining such precision in the air? Recent studies in Italy have produced at least a partial explanation. Scientists photographed portions of a flock from 2 different angles. When processed and studied, this data enabled them to map the specific positions of individual birds. More than 1,300 3D models define the birds' spatial relationships to demonstrate how they interact in the air. This research indicates that individual starlings don't monitor the entire flock. Instead, they calibrate their alignment and velocity to synchronize with the 6 or 7 nearest birds, those to their immediate left, right, and directly in front of them. Each starling seems to follow one simple rule. When your neighbor moves, so do you. As a result, the slightest change of direction by one bird can trigger a chain reaction that ripples throughout the entire flock to generate constant variations in its size and shape. Starlings in flight have been compared to jet fighter pilots who position their aircraft as close as 18 inches, wingtip to wingtip. The pilots don't actually monitor the entire formation. Instead, they rely on a property called topological distancing to track and replicate the precise movements of only the nearest jet. The orchestrated maneuvers of 100,000 starlings are even more demanding. The birds must each detect and respond to the oscillations of the flock in less than 100 milliseconds. That's about 3 times faster than the blink of an eye. And their decision-making is spectacular. This aerial genius isn't the product of trial and error. Instead, the birds' instinctive abilities, programmed into the circuitry of their eyes, brains, and wings, are glorious displays of biological purpose and design, evident even in the lives of creatures we routinely label as ordinary.
I bet many of you have probably seen starlings even in areas here that would be maybe not a flock that big, but you will see how they will form those flight patterns and fly around, put on a show, and that will give you much more appreciation and wonderment for what they are doing. And so this is not a physical type of a characteristic that is being passed on for their kind, but it's more of a instinctive group characteristic that's being passed on. So if we're ready, go to another day, and we'll start talking about the creation of day 6. And I will talk about the animal portion of it, and then Dan will take over and talk about the human portion of day 6. So, okay, let's start out where we need to start out. Then God said, let the earth bring forth the living creatures according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth, each according to its kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth according to its kind, cattle according to its kind, and everything that creeps on the earth according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. We'll talk a little bit more about kind again later on. So we'll just point out a few unique creatures and talk about some of their characteristics and it takes place within their particular kind. You may not be able to see this one very well. This one is talking about an elephant. And let me read these particular notes here about an elephant. I know that elephants, you're probably thinking, are an amazing creature. They have a long memory. The biggest land mammal now that's on the earth at this point in time. But the elephants, the brain is designed with cognitive mapping to remember large-scale spaces over long periods of time. So that's in their migration in Africa. They go over long areas, and then elephants are able to remember where they've been and then how to get back, and then remember those areas that they've been in the past. Also, they can hear one another trumpeting for up to 6 miles. They have sensory cells in their feet that enable detection of ground vibrations that travel up its leg and shoulder bones into its middle ear. The multi-purpose trunk, used uniquely for everything from communicating to eating, has more than 40,000 muscles. So, amazing creature the elephant is that God created. And there's much more to know about elephants than those few things, but we'll just use another example here real quick and talk about the cheetah. The neat thing about the cheetah is its speed and its agility at top speed. So the cheetah has unique muscle and skeletal structure. It enables acceleration from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 3 seconds. Who has a car that can do that? It's probably faster than any stock cars that are on the street. So that's pretty quick. The design of the tail facilitates high-speed steering like a modern boat rudder. So the tail, if you've ever seen a movie of them moving, the tail is, as they're running, that's going to be, particularly if they're turning a corner, that's going to be acting as a rudder to help them to steer as they are running at high speed. And they have complex vessels in the inner ear, enable balance, leverage to turn in midair while sprinting over 70 miles an hour. So very, very unique, very fascinating that God made these creatures for His glory, for our enjoyment, and to demonstrate His majesty. Talk about some more creatures that we don't necessarily see every day in our own backyards, but let's talk about some of the giraffe unique design and complex structures that it has.
3,000 pounds, has gangly legs, and an 18-inch long tongue. There's only one animal living today that fits that bill, and that's the stately giraffe. One of the really neat things about the giraffe's neck is that when it leans down to take a drink of water, you would think that all the blood would run to its head. They would pass out, you would say. But they have a 25-pound heart with over twice the blood pressure of humans. But they don't pass out or receive too much blood pressure. You see, the giraffe's neck has reinforced blood vessels and valves that restrict the blood flow when their heads are down. Have you ever gotten dizzy when you stood up too quickly? So why don't giraffes get dizzy and fall over when they lift their heads quickly up to 19 feet? Well, it seems that they have something similar to a sponge in their heads that releases just the right amount of blood to the brain until their blood pressure equalizes. It's pretty amazing. Now let's talk about their legs. When walking, giraffes alternatively move both right legs and then both left legs. When running, their back legs reach past the front legs before they move forward, and they kick those powerful legs when fighting off predators, so successfully that they can fight off pretty much anything except lions. They can live up to 25 years in the wild. We've talked about the control of blood pressure in the giraffe's head, but why doesn't blood pool in their legs? Well, it seems that the special strong and tight skin in their legs prevents that. How special is it? Scientists have studied the skin of the giraffe's legs when designing flight suits for fighter pilots and astronauts. Just like me, people have been fascinated with giraffes for thousands of years. Did you know the Egyptians actually kept them as pets and they gave them their own hieroglyph? Now, throughout Africa, they're depicted in art, including petroglyphs, pictures carved into rocks. The same is true for Greece and in Rome. Now, how could anyone overlook the stately giraffe? Amazing creatures with unique features that can teach us a lot about life itself. The biblical book of Genesis, which seems to be written as a historical narrative, mentions a creator who made all plants and animals and also created mankind with the ability to appreciate, study, and help and protect and conserve the things that we find in nature.
Okay, a fun question I usually like to ask now is that how many people have been licked by a giraffe? And look at all the hands. Look at all those weirdos out there. There's, at zoos you can go, and oftentimes they'll have an opportunity where you can be able to feed the giraffes. And so they'll hand you, like big leaves of lettuce or something like that that you can be able to feed them. And it's kind of fun. Don't pass it up if you ever get the chance. And then you too can raise your hand when being asked that question. So. Another question about land animals is that the dinosaurs, did they appear on the sixth day? And of course they did, of creation. They were, dinosaurs were there. And and in Job it's recorded that behold now behemoth, which I made as well as you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold now his strength in his loins and his power in the muscles of his belly. He bends his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs are like bars of iron. He is the first of the ways of God. Job chapter 40, 15 through 18. Pretty much describing what we now would say would be one of the big dinosaurs that we'll see the skeletons of in the natural history museums. So many had tried to compare that to an elephant or a hippo or something like that in years past. But it certainly sounds like that is God is telling Job, behold this creature that you're familiar with. And it's a dinosaur that was living at the same time as Job. Land animals, particularly, we'll talk a little bit about mammals, but animals that are mammals, and which we are going to have, human mammals are going to have also the same organ systems. Not simple, complex. Meaning that there's many different organ systems that are taking place within the body, and they're functioning at the same time to keep our bodies in a stasis of balance, in a static state, try to be in balance. Say, for example, I usually use the example that everyone here in this room, if you aren't sick, ill, anything to that effect, most of our body temperatures are going to be pretty close to each other at the 98.6. And for that to take place, there's every one of these organ systems can have an effect upon that. Now, on this, I'm just going to list them off real quickly, but they'll probably explain themselves, be self-explanatory. But we have the respiratory system. We have muscles and skeletal, represented by the gorilla. This is the neurological system. The cow is representing the digestive system here. 4 stomachs in the cow. We're monogastrics. We have 1 stomach. Lymphatic system here in this cat. In the lower right-hand corner, we have represented the cardiovascular system. 3 other systems I can think of that are not represented on that particular slide are going to be the skin, which is an organ system, and then also the urogenital system, which is going to be the urinary tract and the reproductive tract. So 10 systems working together. In an average human, it could be anywhere from 50 to 100 trillion cells working together, communicating together, and having a positive and negative feedback system, performing a thing to keep us in a normal physiological state. So, amazing amount of complexity going on within the body, which then makes you wonder then, how would evolution, man evolve from non-living chemicals, and didn't even mention non-living beforehand, non-living chemicals, how would man evolve into the complicated individual that he or she is nowadays? So with that, we're now going to let Dan talk about the rest of it.
All right, now you guys are created. Come on. All right, are we ready to get this thing done here? All right, this is our last segment. How awesome are we? Wait till you see how awesome you have been created. Let us, God in the plural sense again, says, let us make man in our image. You are made after the image of God. You were made for a purpose, on purpose. It's true, right? A purpose that was determined long beforehand, actually. Okay, according to our likeness, this is God speaking, let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, over the cattle, over the earth, and over all the creeping things that creep on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the living, every living thing that moves upon the earth. Then God saw that everything he had made, and indeed it was not just good, it was real good. It was very good. And there was morning and evening, and there was the 6th day. We have the 6th day of creation. And guess what? Guess what you guys are made out of? Dave alluded to this earlier. We are made up of the same compounds, minerals, that makes up soil. Is that a surprise to any of you guys that know your Bibles, right? No, you're made out of dirt with some water added, okay? And here we have in Genesis 2:7, then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed, literally breathed, nephesh, breathed life into the man, and he became a living being. What's one of the laws of biology? The law of biogenesis, which means life comes from life. Well, who's the life giver? Who could make a pile of, okay, I studied chemistry and stuff. It always bothered me that a pile of chemicals somehow just came to life. Even if you're a devout evolutionist, you can't get there from here. There's a problem right out of the gate. But this is what we see. Okay? So, there's an interesting molecule that's in your body. It's called deoxyribonucleic acid, and this acid specifically that is a molecule that stores information, an incredible amount of information. And that information that came from somewhere, natural processes don't support this, right? What are non-material things? Language, information, and communication systems to actually move that information somewhere else. None of those can arise from a materialistic process. So these are not natural. They're above that somewhere. So that makes them supernatural. So this molecule, when you start seeing what's really going on down in there and how it operates and the nanomachines within it, you're going to die when you see this, okay? I'm going to move quickly through this. We're going to look at some nanomachines that exist, molecular level machines that exist that actually help store the data that you have in your cells, then copy the data in your cells, and then say, okay, I got my copy done, so, you know, that cell that's kind of aging and is going to die off and be replaced through something called mitosis, but it's a splitting of these cells. It says, okay, I'm ready, go ahead, send the new cell off, the copy's done, and you see this stuff happening in your body all the time. As one cell is dying away, it's copying the information to a new cell. It says, okay, we're good to go. Let's let the other one go and let's take the place of it. And that happens an enormous amount of times per second in your body. And you won't believe how many times a data copy is going on using these molecules in these machines per second. Get ready. Here we go. Let's watch this video.
We always talk about. This is a scientifically accurate depiction of DNA created by Drew Barry at the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute of Medical Research. If you unwind the two strands, you can see that each has a sugar phosphate backbone connected to the sequence of nucleic acid base pairs, known by the letters A, T, G, and C. Now, the strands run in opposite directions, which is important when you go to copy DNA. Copying DNA is one of the first steps in cell division. Here, the two strands of DNA are being unwound and separated by the tiny blue molecular machine called helicase. Helicase literally spins as fast as a jet engine. The strand of DNA on the right has its complementary strand assembled continuously, but the other strand is more complicated because it runs in the opposite direction. So it must be looped out with its complementary strand assembled in reverse, section by section. At the end of this process, you have two identical DNA molecules, each one a few centimeters long, but just a couple nanometers wide. So to prevent the DNA from becoming a tangled mess, it is wrapped around proteins called histones, forming a nucleosome. These nucleosomes are bundled together into a fiber known as chromatin, which is further looped and coiled to form a chromosome, one of the largest molecular structures in your body. You can actually see chromosomes under a microscope in dividing cells. Only then do they take on their characteristic shape. Otherwise, the DNA is more strewn inside the nucleus. The process of dividing a cell takes around an hour in mammals, so this footage is from a time-lapse. You can see how the chromosomes line up on the equator of the cell. Now, when everything is right, they are pulled apart into the two new daughter cells, each one containing an identical copy of DNA. Now, as simple as this looks, the process is incredibly complicated and requires even more fascinating molecular machines to accomplish it. So let's look at a single chromosome. One chromosome consists of two sausage-shaped chromatids, containing the identical copies of DNA made earlier. Each chromatid is attached to microtubule fibers, which guide and help align them in the correct position. The microtubules are connected to the chromatid at the kinetochore, here colored red. The kinetochore consists of hundreds of different proteins working together to achieve multiple objectives. In fact, it's one of the most sophisticated molecular mechanisms inside your body. The kinetochore is central to the successful separation of the chromatids. It creates a dynamic connection between the chromosome and the microtubules. For a reason no one's yet been able to figure out, the microtubules are constantly being built at one end and deconstructed at the other. While the chromosome is still getting ready, the kinetochore sends out a chemical stop signal to the rest of the cell, shown here by the red molecules, basically saying this chromosome is not yet ready to divide. The kinetochore also mechanically senses tension. When the tension is just right and the position and attachment are correct, all the proteins get ready, shown here by turning green. At this point, the stop signal broadcasting system is not switched off. Instead, it is literally carried away from the kinetochore down the microtubules by a dynein motor. That's the walking guy. This is really what it looks like. It has long legs so it can avoid obstacles and step over the kinesins, molecular motors that walk in the opposite direction.
Come on now, is God awesome or what? Come on. Now, we did not know this, Darwin. These guys did not know this 100 years ago. No, they didn't know this till we had our radio microscopes and other types of technologies we have to get down into this level. But isn't that ridiculous? Wait a minute. What if this little walking guy only had one leg when he was evolving? Well, he couldn't have made it, and no cells would have divided. We would all have died. But let me tell you something. That happens 23 million times a second in your body. Right there, 23 million. Just happened right there. Go find some engineers to do that for us right now. Okay? Is this just mind-blowing now that we're getting into the molecules and down into the deep levels? It brings deeper meaning to Romans 1:20 and 21. When we talk about these invisible things, it's obvious what he's up to. Okay, moving quite along, right along here. So how many of you guys here work on computers somewhere? Okay, how many of you guys here maybe copy data, maybe over from a thumb drive to another place, whatever? Think about this process that's going on. But I want you to think about how much data we're talking about. A DNA structure, the molecule structure, is capable of, listen to this, 2 tablespoons of DNA matter could store the entire history of the world, all media and all your Instagrams and everything, 2 tablespoons of it. Do you know how many tons of servers that is to store all the world's data? DNA is the most efficient data storage, retrieval, and backup system ever seen. It's phenomenal, but that's what we've got in our bodies. That's how wonderfully you are made. Is that incredible? Isn't God amazing? In fact, so amazing that Fred Hoyle said, you know what, the odds that all this stuff just happened, they're about the same as the chance of a tornado going through a junkyard and compiling a functional Boeing 747 uploaded, ready, fueled up with crew and a flight plan. In fact, flying. You know, by chance. Not a chance. This is by chance. So I'm moving quickly. I'm going to get you out of here on time. I want you to see the odds of this happening by chance when you look at it with the math, with the science at the same time.
Just as English letters convey a particular message depending on their arrangement, the sequences of chemical bases along the spine of the DNA molecule convey precise instructions for building proteins. The arrangement of these bases directs the arrangement of the 20 different kinds of amino acids that make up protein molecules. Proteins in turn perform a vast array of critical jobs inside cells, catalyzing reactions, processing genetic information, and forming the structural parts of molecular machines and other biological structures. Building new animals requires many new protein molecules, and building new proteins requires new biological information.
I used to ask my students a question when I was teaching. If you want to give your computer a new function, what do you have to give it? And they would know. They would say code or software or instructions, a program. All those are the correct answer. To generate a new function in a computer, you have to have code. You have to have instructions. The same thing turns out to be true in biology. This is the great discovery of the second half of 20th century biology, that information is running the show in biological systems. To build a new form of animal life requires cell types, requires proteins, and therefore requires genetic information. And that's the big question that the Cambrian explosion presents. If you want to think about how to build an animal, how would these animals get built, you have to have some explanation for the informational requirements of their construction.
According to modern evolutionary theory, New proteins and new forms of animal life arise through random genetic mutations, sifted by natural selection. But in an alphabetic text or a section of computer code, random changes typically degrade meaning or functionality and ultimately generate gibberish.
As we've come to appreciate the digital or typographic character of genetic information, it raises some really interesting questions about the efficacy of that mutation-driven mechanism. We know from computer code, for example, that if you start making random changes to a section of computer code, you're much more likely to degrade the information that's there already than you are to come up with a new operating system or program.
This problem has long been recognized by computer scientists, mathematicians, and engineers, including a group from MIT who convened a now famous conference at the Wistar Institute in Philadelphia in 1966. These scientists met to consider whether the random mutation natural selection mechanism could conceivably generate enough biological information to build a new animal or even a new protein in the time available to the evolutionary process. One of these scientists was MIT engineering professor Murray Eden.
No currently existing formal language can tolerate random changes in the symbol sequences which express its sentences. Meaning is almost invariably destroyed. Murray Eden, MIT.
Eden knew that random changes to alphabetic or digital characters inevitably degrade the information in any section of alphabetic text or digital code, and for a very good reason.
Whether you're talking about digital code in a software program or a section of text in an English sentence or book, or the genetic text in DNA, there are vastly more ways to arrange the relevant characters that convey the information in a way that will produce gibberish than there are that will produce function or meaning.
Eden and his colleagues suspected that the genetic code faced a similar difficulty. When it came to producing new genetic information, at least enough to generate a new protein, the random mutation natural selection mechanism had to deal with what mathematicians call a combinatorial problem. In mathematics, the term combinatorial refers to the number of possible ways that a set of objects can be arranged or combined. In genetics, the combinatorial problem poses a severe challenge to the random mutation natural selection mechanism. To understand why, imagine a thief who would like to steal a beautiful new bike. All that stands between the thief and the bike is a lock with 4 dials, each marked with the numbers 0 to 9. But there is only one correct combination that will set the bike free.
The reason a bike lock works is that there are vastly more ways of arranging those numeric characters that will keep the lock closed than there are that will open the lock.
A thief without knowledge of the combination must guess the right combination from among 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 possibilities. That's 10,000 possible combinations, which usually would be more than enough to defeat a random search for the one right combination. Yet there is still a way the thief might succeed. If he has enough time to try enough combinations, he might eventually identify the right one by chance. For example, if trying each combination takes 10 seconds, then in 15 hours an especially diligent thief could try more than 5,000 combinations, or more than half of the total possible combinations. In that case, he would be more likely to succeed than to fail in opening the lock. But now imagine a much more complicated lock. Instead of 4 dials, this lock has 10 dials. Instead of 10,000 possible combinations, this lock has 10 to the 10th power, or 10 billion possible combinations. With only one combination that will open the lock out of 10 billion, it's much more likely that the thief will fail, even if he devotes his entire life to the task. So what about relying on random mutations to search for a new DNA sequence capable of directing the construction of a new functional protein? Would such a random search for new genetic information be more likely to succeed or fail in the time available to the evolutionary process? In other words, is a random mutational search for a new gene or protein more like the search for the combination on the 4-dial lock or the 10-dial lock? The scientists at the Wistar conference were unable to definitively answer that question because at the time, no one could adequately quantify how hard the search problem was.
So in the late 1960s, one could make these arguments based upon analogy to things we understood, written language, computer code, but we didn't have any experimental data to show whether those analogies actually suited the biological case. So no one could come up with the exact numbers to answer these questions back then.
Molecular biologists at the time did know that the number of possible combinations corresponding to any given sequence of DNA is extremely large and grows exponentially with the length of the molecule in question. For example, corresponding to one short protein 150 amino acids long, there are 10 to the 195th power other amino acid arrangements of that length. That's an unimaginably large number. But scientists in the 1960s didn't know how many of those arrangements were actually functional. They didn't know, in effect, how many combinations would open the lock. That didn't stop evolutionary biologists from speculating. Many argued that there must be a high proportion of functional sequences among all possible sequences, so that a random search for a new functional sequence would have a high probability of success.
The way they did that is to say, well, maybe biological sequences are not nearly as finicky, not nearly as picky about which characters are where as written language is or as computer code is. And so that's the track that they took. That maybe proteins don't really care which amino acid is where, and there's a great deal of variability, and therefore you can have the same function performed by a huge number of protein chains and a huge number of genes.
But recent experiments in molecular biology and protein science have replaced speculation with data. These experiments have established that DNA-based sequences capable of making functional proteins are in fact extremely rare among the vast number of possible sequences. Just how rare? After working at Cambridge University, molecular biologist Douglas Axe set out to answer that question, using a technique called site-directed mutagenesis. His experiments enabled him to estimate that for every DNA sequence that generates a functional protein of just 150 amino acids in length, there are 10 to the 77th amino acid arrangements that will not fold into a stable three-dimensional protein structure capable of performing that biological function. One correct sequence for every 10 to the 77th power incorrect sequences. That's equivalent to searching for just one combination on a lock with 10 digits on each of 77 dials. To put this in perspective, keep in mind that there are only 10 to the 65th atoms in the entire Milky Way galaxy. Could random genetic mutations effectively search a space of possibilities that large in order to find even a single functional protein sequence?
So given that you have this very daunting probability, 1 in 10 to the 77th power, how could something that improbable happen? Well, as we know generally with improbable things, the way that they can happen is by having lots and lots of opportunities for them to happen. So for life, those opportunities take the form of individual living organisms in which a mutation could occur that could conceivably provide the solution. No matter how rare it is, if you get enough of these opportunities, it can become probable. So the question is, if the number is 1 in 10 to the 77th power, if that's the improbability that must be overcome, would the number of organisms that have existed on the planet since the beginning of life come close to matching that number? And it turns out that it doesn't come anywhere close.
Uh-oh, wait a minute. Is there a chance that we could even get one functional protein? No, no chance. No chance. Not a chance. How perfectly stated this is 2,000 years ago. Holy Spirit driving Paul to this. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, that we can now start to see some of these things visibly that they would not even have known, are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because although they knew there had to be a God behind this, right? Us former atheists or evolutionists, we knew there had to be a Godhead behind this, but we'd be without excuse, you see. We didn't glorify him as God, nor were we thankful, but we became futile in our thoughts and our foolish hearts. The foolish hearts of those that denied that were darkened. Professing to be wise, these people have become fools. That is exactly what we see in our world today. Is that true? Can I get an amen out of that thing? Because you know what? We're at the end. We made it. Let's go. Thank you guys for your attention. I think we have a little time for some questions because we're right under the gun here.
A couple of questions on what we've just looked at here. Anybody?
Couple of questions? And we'll get out of here. Okay, back there. Right off the bat tomorrow morning. Right off the bat tomorrow morning. It's all tomorrow, but tomorrow. I don't hear.
Explain the second law of thermodynamics.
Okay.
Entropy. Things fall apart over time. You know, that's a great question.
One thing I might add, if you're looking for where this is live streamed, there's a QR code right back here on the wall that leads to Bible Truth and Prophecy's YouTube channel. You can rewatch them there. You can send your friends there to watch them at home now.
Looks like we're over. This was a wonderful experience tonight on the creation. Tomorrow, it's a little sadder. It's a little sadder tomorrow. We'll start right at 9 o'clock.
Right there.
You know we'll start. So be here on time. Thank you for coming tonight. Drive safely.